Welcome, everyone, to the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop. We're looking forward to today's event. We have some new authors that are joining us and some old friends. Matty Dalrymple has been with us a few times here at the shop, and James McCrone and Lisa Regan are here for the first time. And we're so excited because they're great authors too. And I actually, I have to blame this on Matty, because I was saying about, we want to do a virtual event, and she said, yeah, and I could suggest some authors for you. And I said, that'd be terrific. So she's responsible for today. She's also the moderator for today. And without further ado, we'll do some announcements at the end and stuff like that. If you have questions though, the event, just so you know, the event is being recorded and will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. Yes, we actually have a YouTube channel. And for those, because some people are interested, but they couldn't necessarily make it today. So if you don't wish to have your face as part of the video, please turn your video off or place something over your camera. Please keep your mic muted for the duration of this event. When the time comes for questions and answers, please type your questions in the chat box for the authors to view. See, I've been taught well, I have notes. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to Matty Dalrymple. Matty?
Deb, thank you so much. Thank you to Deb, and thank you to everybody at the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop for hosting us today. And I am super excited because I'm here not only with two of my favorite authors, but two of my favorite people. I am here today with Lisa Regan and James McCrone. Hey, Lisa and Jamie, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hi, great.
Wonderful.
So I'm going to give everybody a little introduction for the three of us, and then I have a way that we're going to get to know our protagonists a little bit. So I'm Matty Dalrymple. I'm the author of the Ann Kinnear Suspense novels, starting with The Sense of Death and Suspense shorts, and the Lizzy Ballard thrillers, starting with Rock, Paper, Scissors. I live in Chester County, Pennsylvania, and I enjoy vacationing on Mount Desert Island, Maine, and Sedona, Arizona, and I use those three locations as the settings for most of my books. I'm a member of Sisters in Crime and the Brandywine Valley Writers Group. And as Deb mentioned, I am going to be moderating today's conversation. So I would also like to introduce Lisa Regan. Lisa is the USA Today and Wall Street Journal bestselling author of the Detective Josie Quinn series, among other crime fiction. She also lives outside of Philadelphia with her husband, daughter, and her Boston Terrier named Mr. Philip. And you have to follow Lisa on Facebook for pictures of Mr. Philip. She is a member of International Thriller Writers, Mystery Writers of America, Sisters in Crime, and the Crime Writers Association. And she is currently under contract for a total of 20, count them, 20 Detective Josie Quinn novels. And book 12 in her series, Her Deadly Touch, launches this month. So hello, Lisa.
Hi.
And also the other guest today is James McCrone. Jamie is the author of the Imogen Trager novels, Faithless Elector, Dark Network and Emergency Powers, political thrillers about a stolen presidency. His work, Numbers Don't Lie, appeared in the 2020 short story anthology, Low Down Dirty Vote, Volume 2. And his next book, whose working title is Bastard Verdict, is a noir political thriller set in Scotland, where they know how to pronounce Dalrymple without prompting. He's a member of Mystery Writers of America, International Association of Crime Writers, International Thriller Writers, the Philadelphia Dramatists Center, and Sisters in Crime, which I always like to say because we can illustrate that it's misters as well as sisters. Mm-hmm. And he lives in South Philly with his wife and his 3 children. And so today, hello, Jamie.
Hi, great to be here, thank you.
So today we are going to be talking about serial crime writing crime fiction series. And so to start out, I thought it would be good for any listeners who aren't familiar with our protagonists to let us know, if you were meeting your protagonist in a coffee shop or a bar, what would she drink and what would the two of you talk about? So I'm going to start out on that one with Lisa.
Well, first I want to say I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me. Josie would be drinking just regular coffee with 1 sugar and lots of half and half, and she would be talking about work.
Excellent. I think that gives us good insight into Josie's character. Jamie, how about you? What would your protagonist be drinking and what would you be talking about?
So in a cafe, Imogen would be drinking straight espresso, and I would be drinking a cappuccino. And one sugar. And in a bar, it would be wild turkey bourbon, neat. And if I were meeting her in either one of those places and talking, I'd be trying to get inside information from her and, about what the skinny was about certain things. And she would be demurring, probably for security reasons, because what she's doing is, very hush hush.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to say that for my protagonist, Ann Kinnear, I'm going to be focusing on the Ann Kinnear Suspense novels today. If we were meeting in a coffee shop, she would order a large latte and one of those giant chocolate chip cookies that you can always get in a coffee shop. And if we were meeting in a bar, she would be drinking red wine. And what we would talk about is I would find a bar or a coffee shop in the area that has a reputation for being haunted, and I would bring her along to find out if that was the case or not. So now that we have kind of a general sense of what the three protagonists are we're going to be working with, I am curious to ask Lisa and Jamie, how have you gone about keeping your readers' interest in the same set of characters over the course of your series? And this time I'm going to start out with Jamie.
It's a challenge, obviously, but I think that, making sure that the character grows and matures, if you will, across the books is crucial, right? I mean, that's what people do, and certainly as a writer, you're growing and one hopes maturing, and that will sort of evidence itself in the storylines and the characterizations, in all of that, so that Imogen, she fights against her impetuousness and her anger, actually. But she also learns to sort of moderate that to get done the things she needs to get done.
And in the Imogen Trager books, there's a story in each individual installment there, but there's also an arc across the set of three that are out there already, correct?
Yes.
And so do you have to worry both about making sure that each book has some exciting things going on, as well as the arc of the whole trilogy?
Yeah, well, it needs to, for the arc, it needs to fit, obviously within that. But each book, I wrote them to be standalone, or that they could be read as standalones as well. I don't know about you, but when I pick up a book in the bookstore, and I start reading, and I think, oh, I'm liking this, and then somewhere on page 4 or 5, you're like, wait, there's homework. I have to read this other book first. I don't want, I try not to give away too many spoilers, but that I make sure that people are, up to date, and they have the information they need for whatever story they're encountering for the first time, for it to work. And in fact, I find from people who have read, actually have read them in order, like with this most recent one, Emergency Powers, they would say, thank you for sort of catching me up, because, it had been a year and I just didn't remember what had happened. Each one has its own arc, its own ticking time bomb. They are thrillers after all, not literally a ticking time bomb, but, figuratively speaking. And that, but they do all sort of fit into an overarching arc. Did I answer your question?
You did.
I got a little off topic. I apologize.
No, that's great. We're going to be talking more about spoilers and backstory and so on coming up. But then I want to sort of pose the same question to Lisa, because Lisa, Jamie and I are working through like 3 or 4 books. You're working through, 12 now and up to 20. How are you keeping the reader's interest through the whole series?
Well, Jamie sort of stole my answer, that just, I think, speaks to how well it works, is the characters have to keep growing. For me as a reader, if I'm reading a series, nothing is more satisfying to me than characters who grow emotionally over the course of the series. So when I first started writing Josie, you'll see in Vanishing Girls that she's very brash and abrupt, and she has some serious anger problems and a little bit of a drinking problem. And by book 12, which will come out in a couple of weeks, I mean, she's unrecognizable as the Josie who appeared in book 1, in terms of, you know, where she's come battling her own personal demons and how that manifests in her professional life.
When
So
you were working, oh, go ahead.
it's just emotional growth. She has to grow as a human being, I think.
Did you realize in those early books that by the time you got this far into the series that Josie would be that different?
No, and she surprises me with every book. I'm just surprised how like much more mellow she is now than she was before. She's getting better at taking things for what they are and taking people for who they are, instead of just, you know, being angry all the time.
Janie, you had said something, I think, kind of similar. Like, I don't know that you used the word mellow, but more circumspect or something like that. Am I interpreting that right about Imogen?
Well, she's just, she's learned to operate, you know, within the world a bit more successfully, if you will. You know, that she really pushed up against, you know, her superiors. If anybody's seen like Zero Dark 30, you know, there's that, you know, Jessica Chastain would be writing, you know, how many days, you know, it had been since, you know, she, on her boss's window, every you know, I don't have anything exactly like that, but it's that kind of energy and pushback against some of her superiors, and that as she evolves, you know, she learns that that's really not very effective. That if you can, you know, that you can be diplomatic but still hold on to your principles. You can, you know, bite your tongue but still, you know, maintain your principles. And her principles, you know, she wants to find the truth. She wants to nab the bad guys. You know, and to Lisa's earlier point, which I really liked, I mean, that it's certainly true for her character, is that I think it's much, you know, for there to be that organic growth in a character, to see that change, to be a reader and, you know, experience that as well, I think is extraordinary and very valuable. You know, I call it an organic process, but that, you know, if, like Lisa said, when your character surprises you, it'll probably surprise a reader too, and in a very, very good way. And I think that's just, you know, crucial stuff.
Yeah, I've been comparing my own answer to your answers. So again, for the Ann Kinnear stories, I would say that over the course of the 4 books that are out so far, Ann's technical ability, so she's a woman who senses spirits and has a business that's run by her brother, a consulting business basically, where she hires herself out to sense spirits, and her skill becomes more and more extensive with each book. It starts out very basic, you know, and progresses through the books until she can see the dead very clearly, even sometimes mistaking them for living people. And I would say that the in some ways more interesting change is that she has become a more active player in her own life, because I think that in the early books, she's sort of participating in this business. I wouldn't say against her will, but, you know, she's not going out looking for business, right? She's just going where her brother tells her to do and doing what her brother tells her to do. And by the later book, has more agency, I think, and she's more active. And I think that's because she both is feeling more comfortable about her ability. In the early book, she's had some bad experiences with people not believing her that she can do what she says she can do, which has been very hurtful for her. And by the later books, I think she's both better at her job and also doesn't care much what people think about her. So that's been kind of a fun, you know, a fun arc to go through.
Yeah, more comfortable in your own skin, really, right? I mean,
exactly.
You know, I've certainly seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. And oh, go ahead, Lisa.
It's fun to read. It's fun to read, to watch Anne you know, kind of come into herself and have more agency, like you said. It's a lot of fun to read. So if you guys haven't read them, you should.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Well, this is kind of a nice entree to the second question I wanted to ask, which is, how do you keep your own interest in a series? And so with this one, I'm going to go first to Lisa, who, if I didn't mention it before, is on book 12 of the Josie Quinn. In fact, it's on book 13, as I know, but that's a lot of books. How are you keeping your own interest?
Well, I think because at this point, Josie, they feel like family to me, so it feels very comfortable. I've been asked to write a couple of short stories during the course of time that I've been writing this series, and it literally feels like cheating. And then after I will write this short story, I have to go back and pluck out all the Josies that slipped in there, because I'm so used to her. I'm so used to those characters. And I don't know where I heard this, but very early on in my career, I read somewhere that, you know, if you're not interested in what you're writing, then chances are the readers will not be interested. So for me, really the thing that keeps things interesting is looking at Josie and the team and saying, what can I throw at them this time that's going to really challenge them? What's something a little different? What kind of trouble can I get them into? You know, how can I make their lives so much harder than they are? What can I put them through in this book? And so that's always just a lot of fun to do. So between them feeling like my family and, you know, getting to just challenge them every step of the way makes it really.
Oh, Jamie, how about for you? How are you keeping your interest in Imogen's story?
Well, I really like her as a character. I actually didn't envision her as central as she has ended up being, but that in the editing process with the first book, Faithless Elector, she's a star. You know, she was stealing scenes. You know, working with the editor and doing my rewrites, you know, I actually basically erased an entire character and took his lines and gave them to her, and actually, you know, gave her a little bit more to do. And so you know, she's exciting, and you know, I think it's Graham Greene who said, you know, when you're actually hearing your own characters in your head, your job as the writer is actually to get out of the way and just, you know, write down what it is they're doing. You know, that if they've taken on a life of their own, you need to just follow that. And I find her fascinating as a character, as a person, you know, as a person. But you know, and so that the second book is really entirely her book, for reasons that are spoilers that I won't go into. And then in this most recent one, Emergency Powers, I wanted not only to you know, put her in danger yet again, as Lisa was saying, you know, but also I wanted to not just look at the story from her perspective, but to flip it around and, you know, who are these bad guys? What is it they really want? You know, actually, I see that Dick Belsky is on this Zoom event. I remember hi Dick. I remember him saying at one point, you almost feel like you should be rooting for like the bad guy, and he said that was strange and wonderful, but strange too. And you know, so there are lots of things you can do to keep it interesting. And I don't sit down and think, how do I keep it interesting? There's something that is compelling to me that I want to, you know, put into the book, to put into the story. And to the degree that I can, I just try to stay out of the way and let them talk, as it were.
Can you had mentioned, I think you had both mentioned the idea of characters surprising you. Can you just off the cuff, think of an example where your protagonist has surprised you. And I'll throw that out to either one of you. Whoever comes up with an example first can start.
Oh, I have one right off the bat.
Yep.
So in Vanishing Girls, there's a character that Josie just hates, and she cannot control herself with her snarky remarks, and she just can't stand this woman. And by book 10, I mean, they are best friends. They are just attached at the hip. Josie is watching this woman's son and going to drop him off at preschool with her. And so that was not something I ever saw coming or expected, but it was kind of a delightful surprise to see Josie, you know, kind of get down off of her high horse and look at this woman as a real person, and then respond to this woman's efforts to create a friendship with Josie.
That's great. Jamie, how about you?
Well,
An example you can think of Imogen surprising you?
yeah, I mean, this is, you know, it's perfectly in keeping with what we've been talking about. In that, when I first, in the second book, Dark Network, the opening scene, you know, she's in custody. You know, and I had, you know, as I sat down to write it, I had her, you know, kind of defeated and, you know, tired and, you know, overcome. And she is all those things. But as I was writing her, she just kept kind of firing back at her interrogator. You know, she wasn't going to sit down. She wasn't going to take this. She was, you know, she was pushing back in a way that I had actually, until you know, my fingers started moving, I hadn't actually, you know, that wasn't the way I saw the scene happening. And, you know, without actually turning around and saying to me, hey, nevertheless, her character asserted itself in, you know, in an interesting way. And actually it was a much better scene than the one I'd envisioned. So,
yeah, the examples you're giving me are reminding me of a scene in the third Ann Kinnear Suspense novel, The Falcon and the Owl, where Anne, who's usually a sort of, I think would step back, you know, in early books would sort of step back from a confrontational situation. And I had great fun writing this scene where she gets super mad at one of the other characters, and it's a pilot, and she storms into the pilot's hangar and lets her have it. And then at the end, I put in an expletive, and my books aren't really rife with expletives. So I was on the fence. I was like, oh, you know, shouldn't I? And I asked my husband, he said, absolutely. You have to put that in. And I have to say, it's like one of the funnest moments, because I got such a kick out of Anne just saying, you know, I'm not going to take this anymore, and really letting the person have it. So that was a fun one to write. And then it was super fun when the audiobook narrator read it. She did a fantastic job of it, and I got to have fun as kind of a reader listener of experiencing that again. So I want to loop back to something that we've sort of touched on a couple of times, and that is the idea of backstory. So I think the question of how much backstory you put in a series novel is very tricky. And I've seen ones where the writers only make very sort of general comments about things that have happened in past books. And then I've seen them very explicitly say, you know, he thought back to the tragic time a year ago when his sister was badly injured in the pile up on the highway. And you're like, okay, that's okay, because I read that book. But
right.
So thinking about, actually, I'm going to ask this question, first of all, from the point of view of you as readers. How do you react when you read backstory or missing backstory in a series book? And I'm going to start with Lisa on this one.
I prefer just enough backstory so that I can understand what's going on. But if it's at all possible, I don't want to know, I don't want to know who done it, if you will. So for example, I picked up book 5 of the Kenzie Gennaro series by Dennis Lehane, Prayers for Rain, first. And I like that he didn't, obviously I know that they solved the cases in the first 4 books or there wouldn't be a book 5.
Right.
So, that's not a big shocker. But I believe in that book, the 2 main detectives, a man and a woman, were broken up. So at that point I knew, okay, well, obviously they got together at some point and then broke up. But it didn't spoil the book for me in any way. And it was very minor, but I got enough backstory from that book that when I went to read the first 4, I didn't know who the villain or villains were at the end of the book.
Mhm.
So, I mean, I wish I had read it from the beginning because it would have certainly meant more, but the book wasn't ruined for me. I didn't start book 1 and say to myself, oh, I know now from book 5 that so-and-so is the killer.
Right.
That sort of thing. So I prefer, and it's a really fine line, I think. And the longer you go in a series, the more complicated your regular characters' relationships are with each other. And it can be really daunting to lay out just a small amount of backstory in a short amount of text, without confusing people.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, how about you? What do you think about as a reader reading details of previous books in a series?
Yeah, well, Lisa stole my answer this time, in the sense that, just enough for me to know where I am, and and let's move on. I read a book fairly recently that I ended up not finishing because there was so much backstory that I literally found myself going, that actually sounds like a better story than this one that I'm reading right now.
Yeah.
I should go find it and maybe come back to this one. I think you've got a story to tell. There are, facts, information, and events that, need to be included, and that, all of the facts and events that need to be included should, whatever sort of winnowing process you would use for that, should also be applied to any backstory or, any, previous book backstory that, that you have, that the absolute, obviously you would care not to create spoilers, but you can still give, the information that will allow the reader to keep going and understand where they are in the narrative.
Yeah, I'm always surprised at how much backstory I can read, and even if I'm reading the books out of order, it still doesn't spoil it for me. If I go back and read that book where the sister's car went off the highway in the storm and she was grievously injured, somehow the fact that I kind of knew that was coming doesn't ruin it for me. And I almost think it's like reading the back blurb on a book,
Mm-hmm.
or the book description on an online retailer, that a lot of times those things give away a huge amount of information. And I don't know if I just, I blank out that part of my mind then when I start reading, so that I'm starting with a blank slate, but it doesn't interfere with my enjoyment as much as I would have thought. And so now I'm going to use this as the entree to say, either based or not based on the experience you have as a reader, how do you make those decisions in your own books about what to include and not include? I'm going to start with Lisa.
Well, I always ask myself, can I get away with not putting this in?
Yeah.
Because by this time in the series, so many things have happened. And any of my regular readers who have gotten past book 3 will know, I mean, there's huge spoilers in book 3 in terms of Josie's origin story. So the relationships among the characters from 1 to 3 are very, very, very different than from book 4 on. And so if I put too much of that backstory in future books, it basically ruins books 1 through 3. So I have to really be careful what I say and how I say it. And so I'll always say, do I have to put this in? Can I get away with leaving it out? Also would say that you don't need to put all of the backstory in. You only need to put enough in that the reader's going to be like, oh, okay, these two characters worked together before, or okay, she's mad at him because, you know, he went against her orders in a previous case. You don't need to get into the particulars in the future books. So as little detail as I can give and as few statements as I can possibly make, and still have the reader understand what's happening.
Yeah, makes sense.
Less is more for backstory.
Right.
Jamie, you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely less is more, and that you know, I mean, you can absolutely go down the rabbit hole with, you know, pages of, you know, well, then this happened, and then this happened, and you're like, yeah, you know, a reader is reading this story and they want to know what's going to happen next in this story.
Right.
If there's some little thing they that needs to, you know, be clarified, do that, and then keep going. But that, you know, and that in my books, I can use a little bit of shorthand because, you know, in the world of the books, you know, what happened in Faithless Elector, the first book, would have been all over television and all over the news. So all you have to do is sort of say, well, you know, you know, Imogen can say, well, I worked on the Faithless Elector case. Oh my gosh, that's you. And, you know, and we're done. We can go on from there. Or, you know, something like that. But, you know, I try to keep it as minimal as possible because for all the reasons that Lisa gave. But, and also, you know, it's not good storytelling to bog it down by, you know, bombarding people with information that they may not need.
One of the examples that I thought you did a great job of providing backstory is in the third book. There's the scene where the newscaster, the reporter is on, and he's doing a broadcast, and he's saying, you know, of course, as you guys remember, and then he gives like 3 sentences about what we need to know. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was brilliant because it was totally plausible. You know, it was totally realistic as something that a newscaster in that circumstance would do. So it didn't seem intrusive or weird. And yet I was like, good. I'm like reoriented.
Yeah.
And I also like the idea that one of you had said that it's, I think this was Jamie, that it's not just people who start in the middle of a series. It's the people who are reading through the series in order, but they haven't read the last one for a year, or, you know, it's been 3 years since they read the third one, or, you know, whatever that might be. So I like that. And I think for myself, I always try to rely on an editor or beta readers, both readers who are familiar with the series and not familiar with the series, and having someone who's reading a later book in the series for the first time. They're often the people who can say, oh, you know what, I really need a little orientation here. I really don't understand the relationship that these two people have. So yeah, great advice. Thank you. So I just wanted to remind everyone that if they have questions, they can pop it into the chat, and I will pose those questions to Lisa and Jamie. And so the next question that I wanted to ask was, do you feel as if each installment of your series has to top the one before? And Jamie, I'll start out for this one. I'll start out with you.
I hope that I'm getting better at what I'm doing, and that I can look at the work that's out there and feel good about it, but I can also I'm aware of things I could have done better, could have done differently, try to learn from that and carry that into the next book. So I'm hoping that everything tops itself, really. I mean, that you're not, as a writer, as any kind of artist, performer, you want what you're doing now to be the biggest and best thing you've ever done. But you also know that you're gonna, you hope you're gonna think that about whatever comes next. in terms of, but I also, and this kind of cycles back to your earlier question about working with the same characters, is that I also think that if your presentation is exactly the same from book to book, that that might get dull for people, and that so with the third book, being able to really kind of delve into who the bad guys are was fascinating to me, and I hope it was fascinating to readers. But that and that when you have some kind of investment in the bad guys too, I don't mean you have to like them necessarily, but you at least understand them. That when the confrontation comes, you as reader are just that much more invested, involved, and understand what the stakes are.
Do you ever feel as if you have to top a previous book in terms of like the climax? That in the first book, the crime was this, but in the second book, it better be this +1, or
I
third
see.
book better be this +2.
I don't. There's a great article T.S. Eliot wrote called "Tradition and the Individual Talent," and that one of the things he talks about is that when you, as a writer, you start trying to do that to yourself, you end up getting away from what it is that you were involved in, whatever grabbed you about your subject or your story, yeah. So it's not necessary that it'd be bloodier +1, or anything like that. No, but rather that it's fresh, it's engaging, it's compelling, and people want to get to the end and find out what happened.
Right. Lisa, what do you think? You're on the hook for 20. So
Yeah.
if you feel like you have to top yourself, you have a lot of topping to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, in terms of topping, in terms of the climax, I don't feel that way. But in terms of writing a better book, I strive to write a better book with each book.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not struggling while I'm writing, I get really worried. If I'm not pulling my hair out, questioning why why anyone published anything I've ever written, then I feel like I'm not really growing. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like worried. I'm like, well, this book is not going to be good because it's too easy. So I'm always, and every book teaches me something different about writing and
Mm-hmm.
about myself and my process. So in terms of topping, I'm always trying to write a better book. I'm always trying to become a better writer. I'm always trying to learn something new with each one. But it's kind of like Jamie said, which is what I hope is that each book has a different, almost like a different flavor to it. Like it's fresh, it's engaging, like Jamie said. So every book, you're going to have your baseline series characters that people love, and they feel like I'm getting back together with old friends. What are we going to do this time? And for me, each book is a different case. Each case should have a different feel to it. So, for example, at the end of book 10, I mean, Josie's really, she's jumping off of cliffs, and she's dangling over rivers, and running into burning buildings, and doing all these crazy physical things. And then in book 11, she really doesn't do much physical at all. But the trick there is to make that equally as compelling as the book where she is dangling from, cliffs and running into burning buildings and that sort of thing. So I'm always trying to do things I haven't done before, give books a different feel for readers, so that every book feels unique. And so to me, that I don't know if that makes it trying to top myself or not, but in that sense, I just try to get better. I just want the readers to not get bored with this. I want them to enjoy the things that they've always enjoyed, that they've come to expect, but I want them also to finish the book and be like, wow, that was pretty cool. That was a little different for Josie.
That's great. Do you have any tips for that book where there was sort of less physicality going on, but it still needed to be equally suspenseful? Any tip for how you went about doing that?
Yeah, I just dialed up the creepiness as much as I possibly could. So that was more of a creeping, underlying sense of menace. The clues that were left behind in that case, you were like, oh my God, what does that mean? And you just were never sure what was really going on. And so that's a different kind of suspense than, is Josie going to plummet to her death? Or, but I think it can be equally as compelling. And then, the problem with trying to top yourself in terms of physicality is that, there's only so many times you can almost kill your protagonist. I mean, I kill a lot, but there is, I think, a limit to readers' patience. I mean, they love to see her, flying through the air and, being all crazy and almost getting killed. But I think both types of suspense are equally as compelling.
Yeah, well, Jean Gorman has written a good note along those lines, which is, I love the description that you had said about thinking in each book, what can she throw at Josie and all the characters? Do you ever worry that you're overdoing it? Meaning, do you keep a line in mind that you don't want to cross because it might start being unbelievable or too creepy?
For me, no, because this is fiction. And if you're not having fun, you're not doing it right. I don't subscribe. I mean, I don't subscribe to this, you should be completely, totally realistic. I mean, you want to be realistic. There's cases that don't get solved. DNA tests can take 2 years to come in. I mean, if you really, nobody would read this stuff. I mean, I've been around police officers. I've spoken with them. I've been through this myself with my own family. It's not interesting. It's a slog. So to me, if you're going to be writing fiction, then you should be having some fun with it. And to be perfectly honest, the things that I do to Josie, no one ever complains about those. But if I get like, a street name wrong in an actual place, well, I'll get 50 emails about that. But and I'm like, yeah. Really? Because like she was just hanging off this bridge. That didn't bother you? And they're like, no, but the street name, wrong.
Or the bridge name is wrong, right? That bridge doesn't go that way.
I couldn't enjoy the suspense.
That doesn't make any. Yeah.
This was clear. The bridge name was incorrect. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just have fun with it.
Yeah. And Jamie, your books aren't so much the hanging off the bridge style. Okay. So how are you having to ramp up physicality or danger, or what's the ramp up equivalent for you?
It's more suspense, and the sense that the range of action available to the characters is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And how are they going to, are they going to get out in time? Are they going to, how are they going to react? I think, these are very, very bad guys. And, quite often even bad guys will be like, are we really going to kill a cop? That's a step a little too far. They clearly don't care. And so, that, and no spoiler, but I mean, people who, I spend a lot of time on do end up, dying. So you're never quite, you're a little bit off balance. I mean, what's going to happen next?
Yeah.
That's what I'm after. And that figurative cliff is, what is really going to happen? What kind of America will, be left if these bad guys win? They're not friends of democracy or and they may call themselves patriots, but they're deluded.
Yeah.
So that it's more we'll all go over the edge, not just Imogen.
Yeah. Yeah, when I'm thinking about this for the Ann Kinnear books, some of these questions, I thought I knew what the answer was going to be until I heard you guys and I was rethinking it as we're talking. But I realized that at the end of all my books, Anne goes through some kind of physical challenge, and then there's also a kind of character revelation, advancement in some way. But I always try to be careful that the physical challenge she undergoes is not always so serious. So in one book, she breaks her nose. Okay, that's painful and unpleasant, but it's not like she's getting shot James Bond style in every book. So I think that, and it's almost like I want to make a series Bible for myself that keeps track of Anne's injuries. And so a flashback I might use might be, as the guy swung for her face, she really hoped her nose wasn't going to get broken again or something like that.
But that's good.
I do realize that I have to, for my own purposes, and I hope for the entertainment of the readers, I kind of have to check those two boxes, the physical challenge and then the emotional or psychological challenge. But I don't feel like each one has to top, like that each injury has to be more severe than the previous one, because that would be problematic after a while. And similarly, the crimes, I don't feel like I think, Lisa, you expressed it nicely, that they each have to be creepy and exciting and engaging in their own way, but they don't have to be, if someone killed a person in book one, then they better kill two people in book two. That bad things go in that direction. So I actually want to skip over to a really interesting question that Nancy asked, which is, I wonder if you find that the growth and development each of you gives your protagonist mirrors in any way some of your personal growth and development. So I'm going to, I'm going to give you guys a second, because I saw that a minute ago and I got a second to think about it. So I'll let you guys think about it while I give a shot at that. And I would say that in some ways, of all my characters, Ann Kinnear is most like me, except that she can see dead people and she's younger and thinner than I am. But in many other ways, she's like me. Like my favorite is, there's always some joke in there about the fact that it looks like Anne sources all her clothes from LL Bean. In a way, she's based on me. On the other hand, I think that she is contending with her primary dilemma in life, which is that she's contending with the fact that many people think she's either crazy or a liar. Is not something that, so far as I know, I'm having to contend with myself. And so I'm sure that if I sort of sorted through that long enough, that I could come up with equivalent things in my own life. So I'd say mainly my thought about how she's mirroring my own personal growth and development is just that idea that you go through life and you become more comfortable with what you know, what you can do, and more comfortable with not really caring what other people think about that. So I would say that's how Anne mirrors my own life. And I'm going to throw it out to Jamie. Jamie, what do you think?
There's certainly a continual sort of maturation process, for me, although I still surprise myself at how just stupid and teenager-like I can be. But I can't, I don't know that there was any sort of one thing or series of things that I can think of as mirroring exactly, something that was happening for me and something that I gave gave to Imogen in that sense. It's made me more aware of a lot of different kinds of things. I try not to be Pollyanna about the FBI, but at the same time, I don't try to be, oh, they're all terrible, right? This is, a group of people trying to do the best they can. Some of them are really good at their jobs. Some of them probably aren't very good at their jobs. And there are a couple of really awful people, probably, right? I mean, there are always a couple of awful people in any large group. So I think that the way she deals with that, in some ways she is my alter ego, and she's smarter than I am. And thinks things through a little bit, maybe a little better.
Great. Lisa, what do you think?
I don't think that Josie and I really mirror each other. In a lot of ways, we're opposites. Like Josie is very shuts things down, compartmentalizes her feelings, doesn't really believe in crying. I mean, I'll cry right now. I'll cry. I just there's this scene in an episode of Friends where Rachel's talking to her boss and she's like, I'm not crying. So she says something like, I'm not crying because I'm upset. These are just tears of me having this conversation with you. And that's like me. I'm like to my husband, like, I'm just gonna cry right now. Don't worry about it. It's fine. I'll be fine. And Josie will never cry. I mean, we're going into book 12 and she still is not trying to feel any of her feelings. And I'm the opposite, I believe in therapy. Josie does not. And on the other hand, though, what I love about Josie, and this kind of, I guess, makes her my alter ego, is that she will always run toward the danger. She's not indecisive. She doesn't back down. She doesn't hesitate when something is wrong. She doesn't get paralyzed or frozen. She just has that in her to make fast decisions, and she's fabulous in a crisis. And my solution to a crisis is just to scream my husband's name at the top of my that's it. So if it was me and Josie and there was somebody that needed to be rescued, I would just be screaming Fred and she would be rescuing the person.
Have you had a character that does the equivalent of screaming Fred while Josie goes and takes care of the situation?
I don't think so. I mean, everybody's pretty good about that, because I feel like, people that work in law enforcement, at least the ones I've had the pleasure of talking to, and first responders, it's just they're a certain kind of person. That's what they're good at. That's what they're kind of made to do, is respond well in a crisis situation. So most of my characters, while they might not be as bold as Josie, they do okay. And unless it's something that really is emotionally difficult for them, but then I try to have the rest of the team pick up the slack.
Great. Well, that is actually a great lead in. Kelly posed a question, and in fact, she anticipated the question that I was planning on sort of wrapping up our conversation with. And she says, if you had to create a new series based on one of your other characters in your current series, which one would it be? And then I'm going to add to that, and why. I'm going to throw that out to Jamie first.
There's Imogen's boss, Amanda Vega, special agent in charge, Amanda Vega. I really like her, and she is, less analytical than Imogen, and in fact, that's a little bit of that's a source of some friction between them. But I think she could be, a dynamite character. There's also in the book I'm pitching right now, the one set in Scotland, The Bastard Verdict. there's a character named Alan Wilson who is a criminal, I mean, a hardcore criminal, and yet he's kind of the moral center of the book. The editor who was working on it and some other people who've read it are like, are we going to hear more from Alan? Are we going to hear, like, maybe? Yeah, I mean, Amanda Vega, I think would be great. And maybe this guy, Alan Wilson in Bastard Verdict.
And is Bastard Verdict one that you're approaching, assuming it's going to be a series with the protagonist of that book, or are you thinking of it as possibly a standalone? Or not sure?
Emergency Powers basically ends the Faithless Elector series, those 3 books. It is Imogen in Scotland, taking up a new challenge, one that's sort of thrown at her. She doesn't want to do it. She really, she wants to just take a breath, teach, even decide whether she wants to go back to the FBI, right? You were asking about, when you were asking about backstory, one of the things I do, and I got this from one of my instructors, 100 years ago, who recommended that you write the obituary of every main character.
That's cool.
And that not necessarily, and that it's not so that you can refer to their obituary, and it's not even that you're necessarily going to kill that character, but who they are, who they're related to, where they lived, where they grew up, where they went to school, whatever it might be. If you do, and it's the kind of thing you're never going to really show anyone, but it can save a lot of time, and even if you don't necessarily reference certain things, you have a very strong sense of who this person is, and that'll come across on the page. Having said that, so again, in Bastard Verdict, the one I'm pitching right now, I was able to reference her talking about the Ohio River, Imogen talking about the Ohio River, because she grew up right next to it. It was one of those, I was just typing it. I was typing a scene, and that scene, it was appropriate for her to mention that. But that came from her obituary.
Huh. Rhonda thinks that writing the obit sounds a little dark to her, but after all, we're crime writers, so
right.
We're all about dark.
Yeah. Well, and the instructor who said do that is by no means a crime writer. So I think it can work for anybody.
So what do you think, Lisa, if you're spinning off a second series from one of the Josie characters, who would it be and why?
Well, I have two ideas. One is that there's a character named Luke who he disappears from the series in the sense that he moves away. He doesn't die or vanish. He's gone from the series after book 2, and he makes a reappearance in book 6, and he's got this dog that he's trained as a sort of search and rescue dog. And I would love, and the fans love him. I mean, consistently, when I poll and say, who would you like to see back, that he's always top of the list. So I would love to do something with him and his search and rescue dog. I shadowed Pennsylvania search and rescue dogs, Chuck and Vicky Waters, for book 7. And it was like the best day of my life. I mean, they are unbelievable. They're absolutely amazing. I try to donate to their organization every chance I get, because they're not for profit, and they find people, pretty much out of the goodness of their hearts. They will go bring their dogs and find people, and they're absolutely incredible. They're amazing, and so I really became fascinated with that idea. It would be a lot of research, though, to write a really good, authentic series about a search and rescue dog. And then my other idea was to do something with the reporter that is kind of flits in and out of the series, Trinity. Either well, my first idea is that she's supposed to be getting her own show, so maybe I could do something with that, where she does a show on unsolved crimes, or something in that vein, and or I would love to do something where she joins kind of the fictional equivalent of I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, the Vidocq Society, which is, I believe, based out of Philadelphia. It's a number of retired police detectives and FBI agents and possibly, I think, medical examiners, and they review unsolved cases with the permission of the departments who are handling those cases, and they try to solve them. And I thought that would be cool. In real life, that particular organization, they wouldn't allow a journalist, but fictionally, I think it would be fun to do something similar to that, but then to put Trinity in the mix as, you know, as the journalist in the group.
Right. I'll also throw out that if anyone was intrigued by the idea of the canine search and rescue, Jen Blood, who wrote the Aaron Solomon mysteries, did a similar thing, and she spun off one of the characters. It's the Flint Canine Search and Rescue series. So while people are waiting for Lisa to, you know, get done her 20 Josie books and then move on to the search and rescue, you can fill in the time with Jen Blood's Flint Canine series.
What about Ann Kinnear, Maddie?
Yeah.
So,
I really want to hear this answer.
well, it's an interesting question, because while I've been writing the Ann Kinnear books, it is everyone at different points, I think, oh, maybe I'll do a separate series about these characters. And one of them was Garrick Mazur. If anyone has read any of the books, Garrick Mazur is Ann's crotchety, hard to put up with mentor and competitor, depending on the circumstances. And I have great fun with Garrick. I think the readers have great fun with Garrick. And I thought, oh, you know, if I ever get bored with Ann, I'll do a Garrick series. But I realized that Garrick is a little too much for a whole series. Garrick is like good as seasoning, but maybe not as the main course, because I think an entire book with Garrick would be maybe more Garrick than anybody really needs. Another.
I love Garrick.
I love Garrick too. I'm going to do like a Garrick short story, because I do love him a lot.
Test the waters and see.
Yes, I will.
You might really enjoy a whole book of Garrick.
It would be kind of a different book, but I mean, I would never say never. And interestingly, there's another kind of opportunity, because in the book I'm working on now, which will be book 5, Ann's brother Mike and Mike's partner Scott get this kind of side job. You know, Ann's doing her regular spirit sensing engagement, but Mike and Scott kind of get their own little side job. And I thought, well, if I ever get bored with Ann Kinnear Sensing, I can always have Kinnear and Pate private investigators. That would be kind of fun.
They are awesome too. Their dynamic is, I think you could really, that would be fun to read too. I'm here for that.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think it is one of those ones where it's their interactions, which are, I think, the most entertaining thing about them. And so it would be fun to do, to like spend a little more time with them. Hopefully I can spend a little more time with them, even in the context of the Ann books. But
Right.
And then if I think about the Lizzy Ballard books, I can think of lots of other characters that I would love to spin off as a thriller. If I ever get back to Lizzy, you know, maybe many years down the road, that will be what I do there. So I think I see someone in the Deb. There we go. I see Deb coming back. So I think those were all the questions I and the readers had. So I just wanted to thank Lisa and Jamie so much for doing this with me and for being such lovely panelists. And I wanted to thank Deb and all the folks at Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop for hosting this.
Well, thank you all so much for attending. And we have some other authors who have joined us. Dick Balsky's joined us. Amy Reed has joined us. Dick doesn't know it yet, but we're going to ask him to be in one of these in December. But he doesn't know it yet.
He doesn't know.
Ha ha. We also have some specially designed book plates for these authors' books, and we had them signed. They were lovely to let us design book plates for them, and they're signed. And so all of their books are on our website for sale, and we make the book plates. You buy the book, you get the book plate. And Couple of really quick announcements. We have another Zoom event at 3 o'clock on September the 12th. That's going to be Amy Reed moderating a panel, a Jersey Shore themed panel. You got to blame Maddie for this one too. So, because I said to Maddie, you know, I'd like to get some authors in there for a couple of Zooms, and who do you think we ought to get? So she suggested Amy and Jane Kelly and Jane Gorman. So that will be, again, September 12th at 3 o'clock. These usually run, we had the question come up, I saw it, these usually run about an hour. Also, the Penn State Tea Festival in Mechanicsburg in September, we've been asked again by the Rosemary House, who sponsors that. They put the whole thing on, it's amazing. If you're into tea at all, you gotta go to that. And they have asked me to do a literary corner the last year before last and this year. So Friday, September 24th, Christine Trent will be there. And Saturday, September 25th, Nancy Coco and Catherine Bruns will be there. Now, we're still waiting to hear about this one. We aren't quite sure. We haven't gotten the actual go for this one. But we may be doing a Craig Johnson event on Sunday, September 26th. Details will come on that. We have not been confirmed for that one yet. So those are our upcoming events. Again, I want to thank all of you guys for coming today, all the customers, the authors. It was really great fun. And thank you so much for doing this. Have a great afternoon, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.